I'm back. Q&A. Had a good day today. Saturday. Got a haircut. I don't know what you guys think. I think it looks pretty good. My friend Ashley came over, cut it up. Still getting free haircuts, so I appreciate you, Ashley. Alright, we're back with some Q&A. Some questions today about prison. While in prison, is it as scary as movies portray it? Like the fighting, the gangs? And it can be. Not necessarily. It really depends on what level you're at. So the different levels in prison, for at least on the federal level, well, I guess state level too, but they start anywhere from a penitentiary, which is your toughest prisons. As you go down in security levels to a medium, it gets a little less scary, a little less violent, but still pretty violent at the mediums. Then you get to a low, which is Milan, where I started. So the only thing I can speak from first-hand experience on starts with the low security level. And yeah, at Milan I saw some violence. There's a guy that tried to bail on a gambling debt, and he came back, and these guys caught him in the corridor by medical, and they either had a lock and a sock, a lock attached to the end of a belt, and they smashed him. And there was blood everywhere, and they shut down the compound for a couple days. We were all restricted back to our units until they got the mess cleaned up, the guilty parties sorted out and thrown in the shoe, and once they thought it was safe enough to resume operations, they did so. When I got to Yankton, which is a camp, and that's the lowest security level, a lot of them don't even have fences around it. But as far as the inmates go, it's usually the least violent inmates, because they either started there because they were nonviolent and they don't have a lengthy history, or they work their way down, therefore they're well behaved. And even if they were once a violent person, they've rehabilitated enough at least to get to that lowest security level. So naturally, there's going to be less violence. Now, when I got to Yankton, there was some crazy stuff that happened. There were some guys that got laid out, and this one guy was laid out on the ground for probably an hour and a half before anyone found him. There was blood everywhere. I don't know what exactly the whole incident stemmed from, but it was kind of crazy to see at the camp. And there was other fights that happened early on, and when I first got there, I'm like, man, this is crazier than the low I just came from, which was supposed to be much more scary. But as far as, do movies portray it accurately? I think so. It really depends on what they're trying to portray. If they're trying to portray a penitentiary and they're showing rape and murder and violence even on the staff, then yes, that stuff happens at penitentiaries. It also happens at mediums, and once in a blue moon it'll happen at a low, but does it happen at a camp? That would be pretty unlikely. That's where I spent most of my time. So next is, were there ever drugs in prison, and how did you handle it? Yes, there were drugs in prison. There are drugs everywhere. And if you're wondering how drugs get in prison, hooch is made, which is a prison alcohol, is either made, they can make wine or they can make white lightning, which is a liquor. That's more behind the wall type stuff. When you get to a camp and there's no fence, chances are someone dropped off a package and somebody got paid to go pick it up. But behind the fence, it's a little harder to get it. So, drugs might be smuggled through the anus, through visiting, or some type of sort of gate pass unit. If any inmates leave the premise to go work outside of the prison and then come back in, they could smuggle that in that way. Otherwise, they could pay a staff member to bring it in. And yes, that happens. One of the guards from Milan got indicted, I heard, soon after I left. And I had heard that this particular guard was bringing in drugs. And while I was at Milan, I got offered meth, coke, and heroin. And the reason I didn't do it wasn't because I was trying to live a clean and sober life, but because I just didn't see prison as a very fun place to do drugs. So I was just, I'm good. So I did do some drugs. So my clean date is September 1st, 2016. I went to prison September 3rd, 2013. So obviously there's 3 years there where I wasn't using every day. I wasn't even using every week or month. I drank alcohol twice in Milan, and I smoked K2 a couple times, and I also smoked K2 a couple times in Yankton. And right around that September time is the last time I used, and it was K2. If you're wondering what K2 is, it's a chemical that was supposed to be like a synthetic marijuana, used to be sold at pipe shops. People started getting really messed up on it, and it's also known as spice, and people even started dying. Obviously, the government decided it wasn't such a good idea to allow this type of stuff to be sold at smoke shops and tobacco shops, so they outlawed it, and people kept just changing the one chemical compound. Now it's legal again, now it's selling again, and it's really created a headache not only in the drug world but in the prison system. And there was a lot of people that were in prison for selling K2 because they owned a tobacco shop, and it's really that thin, fine line, and people are getting caught up in it. Well, there's a reason that it was outlawed, because people lose their freaking minds on it, and people would get so high on K2 they would end up getting naked. They would end up licking the ground. This one guy thought he was LeBron James. That was when I first got there. I was like, what the heck is this guy on? And they're like, that would be Tukey, which they also call it, or Deuce. So me, the addict I am, said, oh, that looks like fun. So I did it a handful of times. And I didn't get naked or lick the floor or think I was LeBron James or Larry Bird. I guess it would be in my particular situation. But yeah, still did it. So I guess that's how I handled it. I did K2, but I didn't do the harder drugs because I didn't think it would seem like much fun to do those types of drugs in prison. This last question is, can you explain your journey to get off of drugs, and did you go through withdrawals? I got off of drugs while I was in prison. My use wasn't heavy for those first 3 years, so my heavy drug use really happened before pretrial, and then even during pretrial I was using as well. I didn't experience any withdrawals during either pretrial or in prison. So alcohol is a drug that you can withdraw off of, and people have actually died from having such terrible withdrawals. And I guess I've never had moments in my life where I drank so much alcohol that my body needs it to function. Therefore, I didn't get withdrawals whenever I quit using alcohol. I have gotten withdrawals twice in my life, so I did use some heroin. It wasn't my drug of choice. My drug of choice was always uppers, whether that's Adderall, meth, cocaine, anything that takes you up and away, versus opiates that really take you down. And I just never really enjoyed that feeling of being down. I liked being sped up more so, and for that reason I didn't experience withdrawals much. Now, like I said, I did do heroin a handful of times between the years of 2010 and 2011, and I did experience withdrawals twice. So once I did heroin for 4 days in a row, and once I did it for a week 7 days in a row, and I got dope sick, and it was terrible. And I used a drug called Suboxone, which is an opiate blocker, to lessen the effects of the withdrawal process. So I didn't get the full going through withdrawals in a cold cell, puking, vomiting, diarrhea, cold sweats. I never got to experience that joy, thank God. But withdrawals suck. I know. I've experienced them enough to know that they're no joke. They're not fun, and I wouldn't wish them on my worst enemy. So that's it for the Q&A today. I hope you got something out of it. And if you have any more questions, I got a couple more questions I'll be answering here in the next week or so, next week or two. But if you have any more, either drop them in the comments, send us a DM, or email us at resilience2reform@gmail.com.